It wasn't as if he was looking for a new job. Elisha had been perfectly happy running the family farm. In fact, that very day had begun with him out in the field plowing behind a team of 24 oxen. It was hard work he'd done all of his life, but the air was sweet after the first rain in many years, and the optimism of farming the earth reminded him who he was. It was right about then that he felt a shadow fall over him. Relieving the burning sun for a moment and looking up, he must have startled as he recognized the man standing over him. Everybody knew Elijah, the prophet of Yahweh. In fact, most everyone had been up on Mount Carmel just a few days before when Elijah had called down fire from heaven, a man of sorcery and almost magic. But before Elisha could even whoa the oxen and call out a greeting, Elijah took off his mantle, the outer robe he was wearing, and threw it right over Elisha's head. Startled, Elisha felt the rough woven fabric scratch at his face. The weight of the cloth bent his head. The rough fabric made it hard to breathe. But far more sobering than that, Elisha knew full well what the placement of the mantle over his head meant. It meant that Elijah was offering him a job. And he had a decision to make right then. He could stay here, urging the oxen forward to plow furrow after furrow, to plant and harvest and live out his life as a farmer. Or he could walk away from the farm and the family and head off into an uncertain future, one that frankly was not very safe. A fork in the road lay ahead of him, and Elisha decided in that moment to lay down the reins, to step off the plow, and to become the apprentice. As Elijah the prophet made one last farewell tour of the cities in which he'd worked, Elisha the apprentice followed along. And once in a while, Elijah would turn to Elisha and say, "You know, I still have a long way to go. Why don't you stay here and rest?" And Elisha would respond, "No way. I am sticking close by your side to try to learn everything I can from you. If I'm going to do this job, I need to take as many notes as I can." And in the course of his training, the group of prophets who were perpetually on Elijah's tail anyway kept pulling Elisha aside and saying things like, "You know, don't you, that Elijah is not long for this place, right? God is going to take him away. You're going to be all alone." And Elisha would say to them, "Would you be quiet? I'm trying to learn as much as I can here." And this kind of interplay continued until Elijah and Elisha crossed the Jordan River by themselves after Elijah miraculously parted the waters with his powerful mantle. As they stood on the other side of the river, 50 prophets gaping at them from the opposite bank, Elijah turned to his apprentice, Elisha, one last time and said, "Anything else I can do for you before I'm out of here?" And Elisha begged him again, "I need at least double of what you have. I just don't know if I'm up for this." But suddenly a fiery chariot came down from heaven, and horses of fire separated them from one another. A whirlwind pulled Elijah up into heaven, and Elisha stood there, gaping up into the sky and watching Elijah drift up, 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 away from the earth, away from Elisha, who stood there wondering what was going to happen next. And Elisha was crushed. Not enough training, not enough time to learn the prophetic techniques. 50 prophets standing on the other side of the river, waiting for him to do something miraculous. Elisha tore his clothes in despair and wondered exactly how he'd gotten from plowing the South 40 to the position of head prophet. And as he sat there, dejected, he felt a whisper of breeze against his cheek, and it happened again. The mantle of Elijah fluttered down from heaven, right over his head, and landed on the ground beside him. He looked as the mantle puddled next to him there in the dust. He thought about slinking off into the brush and taking the long way back to the field, to the oxen, to a life of familiarity. Take the mantle or not. He had to choose. He got up, the text tells us, and he slung that mantle around his shoulders, and he gathered it close. It frankly wasn't his best color, but he wore it anyway. As he approached the running waters of the Jordan River, he knew all eyes were on him, so he said something like, "Well, I hope the God of Elijah is listening," and he hit the water, and it parted, just like it had when Elijah hit it. And the newly minted prophet Elisha walked across on dry land with a little more confidence to take on the task ahead of him. And this is not wholly unlike today's passage in the Gospel of Luke, which describes Jesus headed toward Jerusalem, his disciples following along behind him like eager puppies, trying to ask him questions and figure out how they could learn from him. One of them called out, "Lord, I'm determined to follow you wherever you go." And they looked at each other puzzled as Jesus said to them, "You know, the animals all have places to sleep, but in this line of work, not even a warm bed is guaranteed." Then another follower ran up to Jesus and said, "Okay, I think I can handle sleeping on the ground, but I still want to go with you. Let me just say goodbye to my family first." And Jesus answered him, "You've got to start being serious about this. Anyone who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is not dedicated enough to be a true follower of mine." Jesus knew he wouldn't be around forever. He knew that in a few short weeks he would be standing on a hill outside the town of Bethany and looking down on his followers as he was caught up into heaven. He knew they would have to make a decision then, whether or not they were willing to listen to his words. "You, all of you, go into the world and preach the good news to everyone." And there it was again. A mantle, fluttering down from heaven, rippling in the breeze, and settling next to them. An invitation. Jesus knew that just like Elisha, for every Christ follower, there comes a time when we find ourselves sitting in the dust, facing the biggest choice of our lives. Should we turn around, go back to the familiar, or will we take up the mantle of responsibility with everything it means and become the apprentices Jesus invites us to be? We're supposed to be followers of this Jesus, God come to earth. And the thought is overwhelming, terrifying. Who am I to be an apprentice of the Savior of the world? Who am I to be God's representative on this earth? How could I ever be like Jesus? As you and I trudge toward our own futures, the mantle weighs heavy on our shoulders. Its scratchy texture irritates our skin. It adds extra weight to all of the things we already carry. Wearing the mantle conflicts with some other things, important things that tie us to the world. There are the voices of those around us that say the most unhelpful things, things like, "There sure is a lot of suffering in this world. How can you believe in God with our world in the sorry state it's in now?" Or some of the historical evidence about Jesus is kind of sketchy, you know. We only have second and third hand accounts of his time on earth. Are you sure he was who he said he was? Or, you know, the whole loving your enemies thing is not going to take you that far. You will become the ultimate doormat. People will walk all over you. But if you and I even suspect that we've heard the voice of Jesus at all, if we've ever even considered becoming gospel apprentices, then we should already know that the possibility of following Jesus and meeting the standards of success that the world hands us may not be compatible. We should already know that wearing the mantle might not be the most comfortable thing we ever decide to do. Remember what Jesus said? Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. If you are not suspicious when you hear that, you are not listening closely enough. Because following Jesus will often find us doing the most ridiculous things, giving our money away instead of spending it all on ourselves, and devoting free time to prayer and reading the Bible and thinking about how we might change our lives, working to translate the message of Jesus into a message of hope and justice for the many in our world who are in pain. If we decide to take the mantle, even with all of these possible drawbacks, we can't forget that the mantle never really belongs to us anyway. The mantle is the blessing and empowerment of God on whom all of us rely for power and confidence and authority. And there are others who come behind us, who need us to wear the mantle well and then to pass it along. It's the mysterious practice of becoming an apprentice and then passing the status along so that the message of hope and its perpetual telling will never, ever end. If you ever come visit me in my office, you will see a blanket given to me by a woman who was my pastor and my mentor when I first thought that maybe God wanted me to be a pastor. It is a very old blanket. It was given first to her by a pastor who blessed her and sent her on her way. I'll admit I thought it was a strange gift. First of all, it's a woolen blanket and it's really scratchy. It's not like those soft chenille throws that we all have on our couches nowadays. I love the colors, but they're not the colors I necessarily would choose for the decor of my home or office. Kind of bright. It's a bulky woolen blanket. You can't fold it down or compress it well. It's fuzzy. It gets caught on things. It's hard to drape attractively over a chair, and it doesn't pack easily. Years of living with it, relocating it to every office I've had, though, have given me some idea of what my pastor had in mind when she first gave it to me. She knew that there would be many hurdles ahead, and I cannot count the times that I've looked at the bright colors of that blanket and my heart lifted a little bit. And sometimes when life has seemed overwhelming, I run my hand over the scratchy wool blanket and I remember that what I'm doing is not supposed to be easy. And have often been times when I have felt desperately alone. But then you wrap yourself up in what you know is a whole lot of love, and you feel that somehow you're surrounded, accompanied, never left alone to your own devices. I suppose that one day it will be my job to pass this blanket along to someone else who thinks they might just want to take a stab at becoming an apprentice of Jesus. And they might think, well, that's a strange gift for Elisha. And for those disciples who followed Jesus so closely, and maybe for you and for me, there's something powerful about the tug on our hearts that just won't allow us to sit with the others in the crowd, to stand on the side with empty lives, and then turn and trudge back to what we thought it was we wanted. There's something about the message, about the mantle, something about that scratchy blanket that is so liberating, amazing, and life giving. I don't know what it is that Jesus is asking of you. Maybe you need to decide once and for all whether or not you'd like to get up, dust yourself off, and try the mantle on for size. Or maybe you've been thinking about what you might be able to do to encourage someone else to take up the mantle. Perhaps yours used to fit pretty well, but now it just isn't feeling right. It needs some readjustment. I don't know where you are. But I do know that becoming an apprentice of Jesus takes courage and conviction, that it's a hard decision, and it's a decision that will change everything. There will be no more hanging back in the crowd, no more hiding, no more sitting on the sidelines. So, for a minute, close your eyes and picture yourself sitting in the sun, your heart in your throat, scared as can be about whatever is ahead. You hear a noise and you look over in the dust next to you and you can see the mantle, the cloth that is fluttered down from heaven. And as you gaze at the mantle, you can hear the words of Jesus, serious words about what you are being asked to do. Are you being asked to let something go? Are you being asked to take something on? Whether you dust yourself off and try the mantle on, or whether you sit and think some more, that is for you to imagine on your own. But today, whatever you do, don't avoid the question behind the perpetual invitation. What do you need to gather the courage it will take to become the apprentice? Amen.